The Hollow's Inheritance, a sleep romantasy of enemies to lovers. Before the first word was ever spoken, two souls were written into the dark, one to wield the silence, one to wear the mark. Odeon arrived at the library, the way our season ends, without announcement, without apology. His coat, long, moved like a second shadow, trailing the faint smell of burned parchment and something older, the dry mineral scent of a language being swallowed whole. No one saw him coming. No one ever did. He was the high censor of Oakhaven University, a title that sounded ceremonial until you understood what it meant. He did not merely restrict knowledge, he removed it. He opened the oldest volumes with gloved hands, and where his fingers moved, the syllables dissolved, leaving behind smooth, unmarked paper, white as forgetting, white as a name no one living could pronounce anymore. Tonight's assignment was a small mercy, or so the rector had framed it. A dying dialect, a coastal tongue from a people who had not sailed in 200 years. 7 words, all of them archaic, all of them tagged in the registry as ghost code adjacent. Odeon did not linger on the meaning of what he removed. Meaning was the enemy of order. He pressed his palm to the open page. The words, inky, curling, alive in the way that sleeping things are alive, shuddered once under his touch. Then they were gone. What he did not notice in the deep hush of the reading room was the soft sound that followed each deletion. Not silence exactly, but its opposite. A sound like breath held in the dark, like ink finding somewhere else to go. Three floors above, in the disgraced wing of the graduate dormitories, the wing where they housed the students whose research had grown inconvenient, Mira sat upright in the dark and made a sound she had no name for. The pain was always near. That was the cruelest part. She would think she had learned the shape of it, would think she had mapped every possible variation of this particular ache. And then another word would die, somewhere in the archives below, and her body would invent a new way to know it. She held her left forearm to the window where the moonlight came through unfiltered. She had held her left forearm and watched the newest arrival surface from beneath her skin, like a word rising through still water. Vailuru, she knew it immediately. It was a coastal word meaning the feeling of hearing your mother's voice in a stranger's humming. There was no equivalent in any living language. There had been once, and now it lived only here, on her wrist, in letters that glowed the soft, the particular violet of something that should not exist anymore. She pressed her fingers to it and felt the syllables pulse against her palm like a slow, grieving heartbeat. "Who are you?" she whispered to it, to the absent scholar 3 floors below, who had deleted it from the world without so much as reading it aloud. She already knew the answer, the same name that appeared on every censorship order. Odeon, from the Forbidden Archives. Seven words he took this evening, 7 embers on her skin. She who holds what he is leaving, she who keeps what should have been. She had no plan that later she would admit freely. She only had fury, a stolen access card, and a forearm that was running out of unmarked skin. The Forbidden Archives occupied the sub-level beneath the library's east wing, a long vaulted corridor of shelves that smelled of cedar oil and something mineral and old. Candlelight, real candles, because the old words rejected electrical current, pooled amber along the floor in low wandering rivers. Odeon was at the far end, his back to her, coat draped over the chair beside him, sleeves folded to the elbow in the quiet, methodical way of a person who has made their peace with their work. An open volume lay before him. His hand hovered above it. She walked the length of the room with a particular kind of quiet that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of intention. And when she reached him, she said, "Stop! What are you? Whatever you're about to do, just stop." He did not startle. He turned with the unhurried ease of someone who had spent years removing the ability to be surprised at anything, and looked at her with eyes the color of old silver, not warm, not unkind, simply assessed the way one looks at an equation whose variables are not yet fully known. "You should not be in this wing," he said. His voice was low, measured, the voice of a man who chose words the way an architect chooses stone. "Your clearance was revoked in the autumn term." "My clearance," she said, held out her arm to the nearest candle. The glowing characters along her forearm pulsing in the warmth. "Tell me, do you recognize them? The words you have deleted? Can you even read them anymore? Or have you already forgotten what they meant?" Something moved through him then. Not guilt, she thought, but something adjacent to it. Something in the silver of his eyes that acknowledged, briefly, that there were questions he had chosen not to ask himself. The candles nearest to them guttered simultaneously, though there was no wind. The shadows lengthened. Somewhere in the far reaches of the archive, something old and shelved and patient turned over in its sleep. He stood. He moved toward her with slow, deliberate calm, and she held her ground with the particular stubbornness of someone who has been hurting for a long time and has decided that tonight is the night they stop absorbing it alone. "You're a living lexicon," he said quietly, as though naming a disease. "I have read about them in the old literature. I did not think one still existed." "Neither did I," she said, "until you started your work." "What are you to me?" he whispered low. "A wound," she said, "you didn't know. You made an I am the ache of every word you choose to take." He reached for her wrist, not cruelly, but with the focused precision of a man who believed he could fix this with the right application of the right technique. His fingers closed around her forearm, just above the newest tattoo, and he began to draw on the silence he kept inside himself. The vast and orderly quiet that was the source of his gift. The tattoos on her skin went absolutely still. Then they moved, not away from her, towards him. The glowing characters rose from her forearm, like leaves lifting from still water, and reached across the space between their skin. And before either of them could speak or step away, the letters had threaded themselves into the pale inside of his wrist, his forearm, his hand, spreading up past his elbow in winding, luminous lines that exactly mirrored the ones they had left behind on her. He released her. He stepped back. The characters stayed. They both stood in the candlelight, breathing, looking at what had just occurred, and the archive around them was so profoundly silent that they could hear the wax pooling at the base of the nearest flame. They are identical now, divided, one half on each of them, and they were alive, in the way that things are alive when they have been waiting for a very long time to be whole. The air between them hummed. It was not music exactly, but it was not unlike music, something low and resonant and ancient, the sound of a language, remembering what it had a voice. "What did you do?" he said. "I didn't do anything," she said. And her voice was strange even to her own ears. Soft. "You touched me," the script decided. He turned his arm over in the candlelight, reading what had written itself there, and she watched something happen to his face that she suspected very few people had ever witnessed. She watched him read a word he had deleted 3 weeks ago and understand for the first time what it meant. His expression did not collapse. It simply opened. A window long shuttered, admitting the particular quality of light that comes in only when something irreversible has happened. "I did not know," he said, and she heard in it something she had not expected. Not an excuse, only the bare, unguarded weight of a person realizing late that ignorance does not exempt you from consequence. "I was told the ghost code was a threat. I was told the old languages were vectors for its return. I was methodical," he said, and the word fell from him like something he was setting down. "I thought that was sufficient." She took at him and looked. The characters on his arm pulsed gently in time with the ones on her own, the soft violet glow moving between them like a shared pulse. He bore the names of what he had earned. She held the grief she had never earned, and in the dark between them grew a language only they two knew. They discovered the boundary the way one discovers most hard things, by accident and at cost. Odeon had tried to leave. He had moved toward the archive door with his characteristic economy of motion, and Mira had let him go. Because the last thing she wanted was to need him to stay. But at 12 feet, the air between them became pressure. At 15, it became pain. Not the dull, bearing kind, but the kind that announces itself in the chest, between the eyes at the base of the skull, simultaneously and without precedent. He turned back. At 10 feet, the pain subsided. At 8, it was gone entirely. They had stood there on either side of an invisible line, drawn by something older than both of them, and looked at each other with a particular expression of two people who have just understood that their lives are no longer entirely their own. The candlelit research cell of the east corridor of the Forbidden Archives was roughly the size of a generous closet. It contained 2 chairs, one narrow writing desk, a shelf of restricted lexicons, and now one disgraced linguistics student, one high censor whose composer was doing considerable work this evening, and approximately 11 inches of negotiated space between them. They did not speak for some time. The candle between them burned. The script on their arms moved in its slow, oceanic rhythm. "Tell me," one of them, he said, "a word, what it means, the full meaning, not the registry entry." "Vailori," she said quietly. "It means the ache you feel when a beautiful thing is ending and you cannot slow it. But also, this is the part registry missed. It means the strange gratitude for having been there when it was still whole." He absorbed this with the stillness of deep water absorbing rain. "I deleted that one in the first week," she said. "I know. It was the first one that came to me." Something shifted in the room. Not the candlelight, not the air, but the quality of the silence between them. She had been hostile and was now something else. Something that required a different word entirely. Perhaps a word that existed only in languages that people had not yet thought to delete. She watched his face move through something she had no name for in any language, living or dead, but which she thought might be the beginning of grief, which is also sometimes the beginning of repair. She fell asleep first. It was late, and grief is exhausting, even second-hand grief, even the grief of watching someone else begin to feel the weight of what they have done. She folded her arms on the desk and rested her head against them, and the characters along her wrist kept their slow vigil. Odeon did not sleep. He sat in the candlelight and read everything on his arm and on hers. And when she had finished reading, he sat for a long time with his hands open in his lap, looking at the spaces between the words the way a person looks at the spaces between stars when they are recalibrating their sense of scale. At some point in the small hours, without planning to, he reached across and very lightly touched the vile oru on her wrist. The first word he had ever taken from her. The one that meant hearing your mother's voice in a stranger's humming. It pulsed warmly under his touch. It did not flee from him the way he might have expected. It simply recognized him, the way water recognizes the shape of it. She stirred, half awake, and looked at his hand on her wrist with eyes that were still blurred with sleep and did not pull away. "I'm going to stop," he said. His voice was very quiet, and it carried in it something that had been there at the beginning of the evening. A weight that was not burden, but ballast. The weight of a person who has decided to carry something rather than set it aside. The deletions. "I'm going to stop." "The rector will remove you," she said. "Yes, I know." She was quiet for a moment, then, "There is a word," she said slowly, "in the old northern script. One you haven't reached yet. One that's still in the books. It means..." She paused, and he felt the characters on his arm brighten slightly, as though leaning to listen. The precise moment when an enemy becomes the only person who understands the language of your particular wound. He looked at her. She looked at him. The candle between them was very low now. Its light pooled and golden and intimate in the way that only the light of a flame that has been burning for a long time can be. Familiar with the dark, unhurried, committed to enduring. The script along both their arms glowed in gentle, synchronized waves, moving like the tide waves, not urgently, not inevitably, pulled by something larger than either of them, older than either of them, something that had known, perhaps from the very beginning, that the one born to end and the one born to remember were never meant to be enemies. They were meant to be a conversation. Odeon leaned forward, and she did not move away. The space between them closed the way a page closes the word, not to trap it, but to hold it, to say, "Here is where this lives now." When his lips met hers, it was not like the fire, it was not like storm. It was like the moment a word you have been trying to remember finally surfaces. The particular unhurried relief of recognition, of something returning from where it had been kept. The characters on their arms blazed once, brilliant and violet gold, filling the small cell with a light that had no shadows in it, a light that was, for one suspended moment, every language that had ever existed, all of them awake, all of them speaking at once. Then the candle went out, and the room was dark, and they were warm in it, and the script on their skin settled into a soft, steady glow, the glow of something that has been found and is at last content to simply be. He was made to end the world's old tongue. She was made to hold what had been sung. But the script knew from the very start that the eraser and the living art were two halves of a single word,
nothing to prove,
too whole to silence,
breath in the
too
dark,
loved to burn.
two hearts
Stay with me, my love.
unmoved.
The end.
Day left its noise outside the door.